Now we're going to talk about how the curriculum works, and it's that manageability piece that is, it tends to be one of the larger roadblocks to teaching tribal sovereignty, or adding something to your curriculum. And so remember earlier how I said to make it smaller we had to make it bigger? This is what we did, is that for every U.S. History, Washington State, or CWP class in elementary, middle, and high school, for every unit that's taught in social studies, we wrote a complete unit for the teaching of tribal sovereignty. So there are in upwards of 26 or 27 units. And within each of those units is a menu of 3 choices for a teacher to be able to select from. There's that teacher who just wants to get her big toe in. There is a level 1 where she can spend as little as 5 minutes just educating herself, or she can spend an hour in her classroom with an activity and move on. Or if she's willing to kind of get in waist deep, there's a level 2. If you want to build on that, then, the curriculum then will add some depth. And that would be in about 3 or 4 or 5 hours of class time, and give or take. And in there, in that level 2, is where we really start getting into the local, place-based part of our curriculum. And if that teacher is ready to just dive in feet first, there's a level 3. And the level 3 means that, let's say I'm teaching the American Revolution and I choose to do a level 3. That means my American Revolution unit is going to take a tribal focus. So I'll still be teaching the American Revolution, but what I will be including alongside those important concepts and events is also what was happening with tribal people during that time. And then also reminding your students, or reminding yourself that there was stuff happening over here on the eastern side. I guess I should mirror stuff happening on the eastern side, but there's stuff going on over here too in our neck of the woods. And so encouraging that facet as well. Okay. A better way to kind of explain how it works is the handout that you have, the one-page handout that is the flow chart of the STI curriculum. The flow chart that talks about your unit of study, and then your menu of level 1, 2, or 3. And then we go into a little bit more description about what comprises a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. And so what we have then with the level 1 is kind of the format for all level 1. We have a one-page article or newsletter that talks about that particular historical era from a Native perspective. And it is written at the appropriate grade level so that your 4th graders, your middle schoolers, your high schoolers would be able to take it and read it. And it of course depends on the reading levels that you already have present in your classroom, but there's also opportunity for scaffolding and doing some in-class activities there as well. But we tried to make it as simple and as short as possible. Then accompanying that article is some sort of student activity. And it could be in the form of study questions, crossword puzzle, word find, something that will make your students recognize some tribal sovereignty concepts, names, and so forth. And again, we're just skimming the level here. But one of the things that you can tell teachers is that it's so simple that that you could leave it for another person to teach, because it is really kind of the sheet study guide concept. And what could be less threatening than that? So you would get your participants to think, can I do that? And then, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. And you get your participants to think about including tribal sovereignty in those terms, in little tiny bits and pieces. You can you can emphasize that what they're doing then is 100% more than they did last year. And that's an enormous step. So they should not at all be timid about saying, yeah, I'm just doing a level 1. Because down the road with the next unit, there's a whole other set of levels 1, 2, and 3. And so the next unit, your teacher might want to try a level 2 at that time. And so the opportunity for teaching tribal sovereignty doesn't end in November during Native American History Month. It continues from September to June. But if you're thinking, I really want to try a level 2, then the level 2, both the level 2 and level 3 build on that level 1. So you're not having to go back and reteach. And so then with the level 2, there'll be more deliberate inclusion of local history and local issues. And the activities often come in the forms of what we call mini web quests. And those are research projects, online research projects with an already pre-selected list of sources. So you don't have to worry about your students going off into Google land and typing in Tulalip and getting 504,000 responses, or just taking that first hit, the first hit that they get. And, that might be some guy in Kentucky's research project. I mean, who knows? And so you as a teacher and your students can rely on the validity of those sources. And then the level 3 again builds on that and builds toward the successful completion of the state CBA. And with that, then you're satisfying your social studies requirement of completing one of those state required assessments. And most of the time, we have chosen the OSPI recommended CBA for that particular unit. There were only a couple of cases where it was trying to fit a round peg into a square hole, or in trying to make our content fit into that particular CBA. And so we took the license to be able to say, yeah, they say this, but you know what, it would work better here. So remember how I said, can you get your teachers nodding? You can get your teachers nodding, your participants saying, yeah, I can do that.
Here is where you will find the units for the elementary, middle school, and high school on our website.
You have a map then of Washington State and the ceded land areas, and then the current reservations of tribes in the Washington area. And I say Washington area or the Washington State because some of you, especially East Siders, know that just because there is a political boundary here does not mean that that's where the tribe ends. So for example, the Umatilla in Oregon are definitely part of this process as well. So we don't necessarily just go by the political boundaries.
I spent a lot of time in my 8th grade U.S. history class, which is what I teach exclusively, talking about Indian removal, particularly in the Jacksonian era. And one of the things I do at the end of the year is I have evaluations that say, what were your favorite or least favorite things to do in my classroom and how come? And invariably, that unit where we talk about Jackson, Indian removal, and the Marshall Trilogy and everything else is on the top and bottom of everybody's list. They say it's one of my favorite things to do because I had no idea, right, that this happened or how this happened or where it happened or under what circumstances. And on the same token, I get equal numbers of this was my least favorite unit because it's so sad, and middle schoolers are very emotional. And so, when you teach them things that are depressing, I don't want to talk about that, it's so depressing. But I think that point of being able to introduce to them information that is skimmed, when I we were looking at adopting curriculum this year, and one of our history books had, I think, 2 pages on the Jacksonian era and Indian removal, or the Jacksonian era, it was a bunch of stuff on the banks, and then a page or 2 on this huge disruption in American history, shall we say, a tragedy. And so I think that this is a terrific opportunity for you to invite teachers to teach things that are uncomfortable. because a lot of teachers, especially if they aren't well versed in social studies, this is something that they're very cautious about, and this invites them to do those things that may be uncomfortable for them. And I think it's a real benefit to all students, whether native or not. So I think one of the really important things that you can do with your building or with your district, depending on the size of your district, is to create a scope and sequence in the context of what you teach, using the overlay of the STI curriculum with what you already teach in class. Something that we did in my building is go through and we broke down our scope and sequence of the year of what we taught, and we generally teach our curriculum in 5 units. So we have the Revolutionary period, and then we have westward expansion, we have slavery, we have Civil War, and there's one in there I'm missing, but and then the Indian removal, which kind of folds into the westward expansion as well. And so we took our scope and sequence that we already had, and then we went through that graphic organizer that we've shown you before with those units, and we cross-referenced those. And what we ended up with, and I wish I had a copy to show you, I wasn't thinking far enough ahead, but what we came up with then was a scope and sequence which included not only our traditional textbook scope and sequence or our unit scope and sequence, but then it had to tie in which STI units fit into each section, so that you would have, there was an overlay, and it was a 1-page, quick and easy graphic organizer that we could tape up to our bookshelf, and so that on those times when we were feeling pressed or we felt a little lost and confused about where we were going next, we could look up and say, oh, okay, here's something that we can bring in. You know, our Washington State history people could say, oh, there's something in the state we're in, which is put out by the League of Women Voters, a terrific resource. I know Mark's building just got a set of these through the pilot. And so there are all sorts of resources that are available that we've compiled, and it's, I think, a really good use of your time when you're presenting to your staff is to begin that process of thinking, okay, rather than overwhelm, as we've kept talking about all day, with this is something extra that we're going to add on, it's how can we incorporate this into what we're doing already.